the two decoys on the left-hand end there are by R. Madison Mitchell from Havre, and Madison was an undertaker in Havre, and a very distant cousin of my father's, and back in, I think, I'm pretty sure it was 1968, the Corcoran's, I had Madison make me 50 of them because I was body booting on the Susquehanna Flats with the old Wild Goose rig, and that one I saved and didn't put in the water ever, so it's in original condition and just like it came out of the shop. But it was kind of funny, you know, one of the traditional pastimes of undertakers in this country has been cabinet makers, and they used to make their own caskets and things like that. Well, kind of around this part of the country, some of the undertakers carved decoys instead of being cabinet makers. And my old buddy Jack Ulrich, he was an undertaker from over in Baltimore County. He made this one right here, and they kind of got into doing that. Mr. Mitchell, he was finally to the point where people were asking him to make birds all the time for decorators, for, you know, people to collect and things like that. And he had this book here that you go in and he'd put your order in the book. Okay, and people be in there, I want a pair of this and I want a pair of that, and they would wind up being, you know, something just to put on the mantle. Well, I went in there with Captain Mark Smith years ago, and Mr. Mitchell, you know, he vaguely knew who I was, but he knew my dad pretty well. And Mark and I walked in there, and he was the one that he owned a cabin boat that we body booted off of, and so went in there and I said, Mr. Mitchell, I'd like to get some new goose decoys for the rig. And he said, you boys body booting? He says, yep. And he said, how many you want? I said, well, it depends on how much they cost. And so he said, well, they're $10 a piece. Well, Mark Smith was working for Conowingo Power up here at Susquehanna, on the Susquehanna River at the dam at Conowingo, and Mark said, well, Mr. Mitchell said, I can get you some nice cedar poles that they just took down off of one of the power lines. And would that make any difference in the price? And Madison says, well, I'll tell you what, you boys are going to use these birds for gunning, aren't you? He said, I said, yes, sir. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, you make it $9 a piece, and I want the cedar poles, because they like cedar poles to make the bodies for the birds out of. And so we went in there, it was probably in the springtime, April or May, and he said, don't worry, boys, I'll have your birds ready for you this fall before gunning season starts. And we had our birds ready for, back in those days, the goose season started about the third week in October. And we had our 50 birds ready, and I'm sure there was dozens and dozens of people that wanted birds to stick on the mantle that didn't get theirs till the next year or so. But that's kind of the story about getting those birds from Madison Mitchell years ago. This is a picture of me when I was probably 21 or 22. With in the background, three of these decoys are the same cork Madison Mitchell birds that I talked about before. Right in front of me in the picture is a well, some people call them John Gooses and things like that, but they were just a silhouette with a head that stretched out straight to hide your gun barrel, and a box built into the back of the silhouette to put your shells in, and it was driven down into the sand with a long pole, and then you had a cotter key, which as the tide went up and down, you raised and lowered the silhouette with the tide, and as you did that, you hunkered down behind the silhouette to hide from the birds when they were coming in. And it was a pretty effective way. It's not legal anymore because when you're body booting, you have to stand on the natural bottom. But we shot a lot of ducks and geese back in those days. That was probably a pretty good day because it was a little bit overcast, and the picture was taken out across the flats, and you can't see any land. you know, and the decoy makers around here, you know, it's been neat. You know, like Jeff Coates, he's, you know, one of the young guys making decoys, and he's making them to gun with mostly, and that's the way the old timers would do it, you know. And you know, we us folks around here, I guess we just like, you know, our ducks and dogs and decoys, and you know, it's kind of been a wonderful place to be for all my life.
That guy. There's Johnny. One, two. Here we go. And they're up. And they're down. They're down. Another one. Another one. Another one. And the final one.